Okay, planes overhead, and we have yappy dogs next door. But I feel really strong about doing this recording outside in my backyard and looking forward to just recording it actually and um, and seeing if I can articulate something that is actually not that common to articulate. So, a series of things have been happening for me personally, but also uh, not just me in consults and in private conversations. There's been this clear sign of something awakening, something coming, surfacing that we need to probably discover a new perception about. So the one thing I just want to say is that we have for some time been living in a psychological paradigm, and our belief in that paradigm is that um, the what's the word I want, that the inner child paradigm, the sense of traumatic birth and traumatic upbringing is the source of our psychology, the source of our sense of self. And the interesting thing is that um, there's something that's been going on recently in not only consults and friends and family and myself, but it is in conversations we've had. It's like we've been unearthing something, but we didn't know what we were unearthing. We didn't have access to it. And perception doesn't always come before access. Sometimes we can access something and it's alive and well in us, and we just haven't perceptively um, comprehended it. But in this case, I'm very clear that I'm perceiving something before we have access to it. And so what is that? What is it that I'm perceiving that I know we don't have access to? And just how excited am I about that? I'm pretty excited. And here we go. So we live in a paradigm of personality that we don't examine, just like we live in an I conversation where we're assigning qualities and perceptions to qualities and assessments of ourselves that aren't necessarily. It's so funny. Hi, everybody. I couldn't tell if anybody was on the line, and then there's this little thing that said expand video. So I'd expanded video, but I don't really like to look at me that much. So, so I thought, God, there are no comments. So not maybe nobody's here, which is fine because I really want to have this conversation. And I mean, it's not fine that you're not here. It's just that somehow it wasn't keeping me from carrying on. But anyway, so then I noticed I can smaller the video because I'm on my computer. And there you are. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Lovely to see you. And thank you for being here because it really matters to me, this conversation this morning. And I know for especially those of you on this call, over the years, you've been with me when I start to psychically unpack something. And there's almost like this stress I go through this because it's so alive in me. It's so vibrantly present. Like I used to make this joke that if Jesus ever showed up, nobody believed it was him. And there's just these things happening that are really honestly unbelievable. And C and I have really taken on uh, being this is so cute. I have dogs next door that yap, 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 and they're being very quiet. It's very sweet. And good morning, Lisa. And so the point is that I want to have this conversation in your presence because for me, as a psychic and a seer, as a seer and a prophetess and a mystic, I'm part of you and you're part of me. We're part of a unified field and it's in the air, or we could say in the field. And this shows you how Esme is so proud of her wings because I'm in the shadow and Esme's in this invisible and in her wings. Very sweet. So and Esme, for those of you who don't know, is the dragon behind me. She's the mother dragon and there are two babies, Oshin, who wants his name changed from Owen to Oshin, and Yolanda, and you can't see them from here. So let's just try to think this. Let's not try to listen to me like believing me, okay? For God's sake, no authority outside yourself. But listen with your acute listening to what I'm saying and apply it to experiences that you might have been having recently or you might have observed in others. Because as human beings, this is our magic. As we listen each other in the field of creation, as we do that, we literally crack the codes that have calcified a certain reality and made it appear real. And we literally crack the codes and tell a larger reality, a more integrated, vibrationally higher frequency reality literally gets a place. We give place. Human beings give things place. And just because we've been enrolled that the outside world is our authority doesn't mean it's real. In fact, it's incredibly the greatest lie. So the point I want to go back to and refresh, and anybody that wants to write comments like anchoring points or taking things I'm saying and reinforcing it by putting in the comment line as something you want to register. There's a kinesthetic action between fingers and typing and listening because this is going to I'm my interest is how do I shorten the distance between people comprehending one of the things occurring, which I think is fundamental to everything, and how do I shorten the distance in the cellular system so that the original nature, the original design memory, and the cellular system that's rising can surface without trauma and in the integrity of itself. Um, that's it's not really about getting new information. We get new information all the time. It's can we get access to it? So for those of you that came on later, it's not we can perceive something often without having access to it. So the key is to get access to something no matter whether we perceive it or not. Like if we like I recently took on a journey of wholeness, of revitalizing my system. It had completely collapsed and was in danger of dying. And so I didn't try to cure myself or heal myself. I just started to consider what did my system need to have a whole system response. And then I began to trigger in myself the deeper cellular memory, kind of making intuitive requests or synchronic requests that I followed the track of and have had visible results. So let's go back to this idea of our psychology, the psychology we all of us on this call were born into. The psychology lives in a very recent time, Freud actually, and here come the dogs. And Freud created the premise that everything wrong with us happened shortly after our birth in our upbringing. And then it expanded into a more expanded perception, which I've been following for a while, which is that the societies or the cultures we're born into aberrated, aberrated our trust of ourselves, aberrated a sense of self, and that we were basically recovering from that trauma. But a long time ago, I was in my late 20s, I asked this question of myself, ontological question, which is the study of being. I said, well, who are we going to be after we recover? Who are we after we recover from the trauma? And can people not see that the constant attention to recovering from trauma only and not in the discovery of who am I really, actually is reinforcing the trauma because it's not going past the trauma into the point of origin. So all this stuff has been happening. I wrote a letter this morning and I'm going to post it here. I'm going to edit some of it out, but some of the meat of it I'm going to post because I'd really like you to read it. I'll be posting it on the Sacred Space for Rest and Courage group because frankly, even for me, it's a Sacred Space for Rest and Courage group. It's a place that's why it's a private group because in that group I can be myself, as we all can, and operate on behalf of life and what has us exist as whole. So the point is that a series of things have been happening, which I became very aware of. And I particularly became aware of them during the prophetics because I became aware that the journey to the other side lives in the emotional palette. It, in other words, it's like a river. The emotional palette's like a river. And when we fall into that river, it basically carries us downstream. It carries us downstream, just like a river does. Uh, uh, and uh, and so we're kind of being carried downstream through our emotional palette because that was the construct of our cellular design that when our emotional field began to enliven, when it began to awaken, it instantly became compromised. And we consider our emotional palette as something separate from self, but actually our emotional palette is self. The emotional palette registers self, I'm sorry. And because even though we don't want to say it, we all want to be happy. So happy is a baseline for human beings. We want to be happy, we want to play, we want to love, we want to laugh, we want to enjoy. This is the baseline. And we came in at a time where the baseline had been corrupted for a while. So let's imagine this. See if and truthfully, I tried it on Heather this morning. I tried it on C this morning. Anybody that gets near me, I'm going to try this on to see if I can articulate it, because the presence of it, the perception of it is strong for me, but the articulation of it is still weary making. I haven't gotten it where I content that I because I'm a psychic and I live in language resonance. So if I can articulate something accurately, it goes in the cells. So I'm not at that catalytic cellular impact point, but you all are my practice ground. So thank you. So let's imagine you are born and that you don't know about the paradigm here. You don't know about this child that becomes affected by our society and our upbringing. You don't know about that. You're a cellular system. You're a cellular system, which is in this book that we're about to get into the nitty gritty chapters of it. I'm getting into with Heather, the latter part of the book, Mind of Creation. You don't know you're a personality. How about that? Shocking. You are a little tube. And that tube is, I always imagine it like parchment, like a rolled up scroll. It's like this rolled up scroll. It becomes a skull brain, a solar plexus brain, and an intestinal enteric nervous system forms into the sympathetic, parasympathetic, solar plexus region and expands into the vagus nerve, coming up into the midbrain of the amygdala, the hippocampus, and hypothalamus. But that's your original self. That's your original nature of original design, embodied, embodied. I know, shaky to even try to consider it. I get that. I get it. So what was that little scrolled up scroll? What was in that cellular, what was etched in that parchment? What was rolled up in that little scroll? And you can't, hi everybody, you can't miss that your whole life you've been trying to search for self. What am I? What did I come to do? What's my purpose? So clearly, you wouldn't be asking those questions if the answer wasn't somewhere. Otherwise, you wouldn't even know to ask the question. One of my favorite quotes, which is mine actually, one of my favorite quotes is, uh, "You wouldn't be looking for something you'd lost if you hadn't one time had it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have known it was lost." That's the most important thing I can ever say. And so we wouldn't know we had a self if we hadn't lost it, and we were busy trying to find it again. So let's imagine that when that little scrolled up parchment came in with all its accurate data, all its original memory, that original memory isn't of now. It isn't of this place. That thank you, Lisa. Right on. This is, I'm telling you, imprinting the field is everything. Honest to God, it is. Imprinting the field. I'm just the mouthpiece. So anyway, the point is that something had to form the database that went into that little scroll. Something had to script out, let's make imagination. Don't forget you're this and you're this and you're this and you're this. Now, I think the caveat, I think the other thing is the tremendous of us amount of us were, I think they were either, I think the two threads, there may be more, but the two I'm fascinated by. I think, so I'm talking about pre-birth, pre-birth. I think one thread has to do like with me, my kind of being, because when I came in, I couldn't forget. And I really went psychotic by the time I was 16 for about 3 months because the conflict of contrast between of what I listened to and what I heard and how I interacted with everything but humans, and how this trauma, I would be in my mother's mind and the horror in my mother's mind of self-degradation and hate and anger and rage literally almost tore my mind apart. But why did it almost tear my mind apart? Because I remembered something that wasn't that. This is the important part. I remembered something that wasn't that. And then, with great help from people around me, they created an environment like we have here in Sacred Space for Rest and Courage, and we have in the WhatsApp Field of Tantra Mod and Tapa Talk. In the environment of protection that others provided me, I had wiggle room to be different, to operate consistently with self, which I've done for quite a while now. But I never belonged here in the human world, because in the traditionally cultural human world, because as and I think this is true for many of you. Here comes the Air Force plane. Uh, because if I had adapted completely, I would have lost this little root of this parchment that was carrying the database of self, which I am. And it was here before I got here. That's the point. It came with you. It's part of you. It's not a developmental. It's not. Here's the thing on this thread. I can't. The part that I find fascinating is the contrast in so many people. You got to realize I've read thousands of people, probably by now 10,000 to 50,000 people. I mean, or engaged with them in some way. I mean, a gigantic, mega 55 years of humanity. And we just wouldn't be so upset. We wouldn't be so, just because we bought a certain explanation, that explanation hasn't worked out well. But I begin to think that one of the threads is that we came in here on purpose. We came in here for this time because we actually realized as a conscious being, not a human, a conscious meta, some people call it the transcendent self, but people think that means leaving the body, which is kind of bizarre when it's in the body. But the record is in the body. The record's not out of the body. It's in the body. And that's why the body gets ill and sick and distorted and broken, because the body won't forget. It won't forget. It becomes a victim of the distortion that it was born into. But it still won't forget. So your consciousness can stay alive no matter how aberrated the body is, because it's fighting for that little scroll and that data in that scroll to stay alive here, and that stays alive here in us, our consciousness. So my sense is, I have so many, and everybody on this call, it fits this pattern. My sense is in people I've read that the contrast, the conflict is so intense because we actually did come back in here to reestablish what I call paradise. to reestablish the original nature, the original design here, and we had to do it on two fronts. We had to do it for ourselves with the personalities we found ourselves born into that that had to aberrate to survive the cultures we were in, and we probably had to find purpose because we had a job to do. Like for me, I was completely mission based. That's why I want to send you some excerpts from this letter I wrote some friends of mine this morning, because I just so I think that's one thread, not to get off point. Remember, I'm trying to learn to articulate, so I might be a little disassociative in my speaking while I'm thinking and talking and figuring this out. And any comments you make, anything, I play off of now that I have it on my computer where I can see the damn comments. Um, so, so I think that's one thread. And then the other thread, and I don't think we came from, some of us came from here. I'm sure I didn't come from here. I'm clearly a visitor, but I'm a visitor that loves this place. And we just know that. I mean, come on, you know, quit having to prove yourself. Some of us just know that. But the other thread is the original human, the human of paradise, the human of Eden, the human of this beautiful planet and her kind that I came here to operate on behalf of, for sure, and to make it my home, one of my homes. And so I think those are the two threads. One is the species uh, that comes from this earth herself, the primordial mother here, and then those of us that have a more cosmological consciousness that came in to aid. And we had to do it through the body, and we had to do it through the personality structure we were born into. So don't ever doubt what I am about to say. You are in the awakening of a personality that lives within you that has had no place here. I promise. I have stayed in business for 56 years. There is a reason for that. And I promise that what is happening at this time is that that little scroll has held on through storms, through toxicity, through terror, through fog. It is held on. And we have been doing our best as a thinking bobblehead to try to get to something in our ignorance, in our unconsciousness, in our fogness. It's and that the personality structure that we have been uh, crashing into the interface between the world around us and ourselves is now diminishing. And that what's starting to rise is a meta point, a unity point between the biological field, the physical field, because the biological field will call the body. The physical field is the literally physicalness around us, and and the memory, the remembrance, as Donna said. It is the remembrance, it is awakening. But that one liner is just unbelievably packed with what's happening now. Unbelievably packed with this awakening. So I'm gonna reinforce it by putting it on the comment on I'll post it on the group, but the part of the letter. But I want to kind of tell you what really woke me up into it. First of all, I've known C from the day she came in to be my client, now my friend and client, and I'm her friend and client, and she lives in this house with me, and um, and I always knew her, and a long time ago, and many of you know this, it doesn't matter to me, never has, the facade of personality that the aberrated personality that we all have to wear just to keep from being tossed. Uh, I've always directly related to, I think, as a cellular empath, I think I can pretty logically say I've always related to that little scroll and the data in that little scroll. So when you're doing a consult with me or an activation, I'm relating to that little scroll, that little wound up scroll, that parchment scroll that became your intestines and your solar plexus and your parasympathetic sympathetic nervous system and your vagus nerve and your midbrain, and which is the primordial aspect. that we often try to trash to become more domesticated as a culture. I'm not saying as us here on this call. So I had a dream yesterday. Some of you heard this already. And in the dream, I was with a woman. I actually sent her the dream. I haven't spoken to her in years. And this woman is amazing. She is confident, personally confident. She doesn't have any big role in the world. She loves her family. She lives in a big house. Her husband is a president of a muckety muck company. Uh, but she's just genuine and kind and loving and loves loves a normal life, an everyday life. No mission, no purpose. But I've always admired her, and we've always had wonderful times when we're together. So she was in the dream, and I realized she represented an aspect of my everyday personality that kind of got squashed because in my case, and I know there's a few of you on here, the mission-based transcendent self or meta self was so strong, it just railroaded the personal self and dragged it along for the ride because it needed to get done what it came to get done here, but all the time knowing that the evidence is when that meta self or that transcendent self can have a place here. Do you understand? It always knew that, but it didn't matter how many lifetimes it had to come back here or visit here. It it only mattered that we were the litmus test. We were the evidence. When we could have a place here, these transcendent meta selves could begin to have a place here. The only way that it could have a place here is if this place had returned to the original nature of original design. It's all written in a little scroll that each of us has that became our intestines, etc., and so on. So, so in this dream, I was aware that I couldn't get to it. I couldn't get to that personal self that I've been a mission-based self since 3 years old, and I literally became consciously conscious about three, which is not fun when you're in a body like my daughter had it physically. Like she used the one time her swimming teacher came out crying and said, please tell her her body's just not ready to swim at the level that she thinks, and she would be so mad at her body to see what she does now. Unbelievable, unbelievable body and unbelievable capacity. She's like a Hercules Wonder Woman. She's like a Wonder Woman. But at 6 years old, she was in horror of the body that wasn't doing what she knew it could do. And we've all have our version. That's all I want to say. So in this dream, I couldn't get access to that sense of normal personality in the dream. And then as I literally woke up and I was going to walk out the door of my bedroom, I heard her voice, this person's voice. Her name's Barbara. And I heard Barbara's voice go, really? A lone voice in the wilderness? Really? And it struck me like lightning because she had said the day before, and I think I said this earlier. I don't know if I did because I was in a conversation with Heather earlier, that the moment of now is everything, not not being in the past anymore, not thinking what's going on of us is trauma recovery, but it's restoration, reclamation, recovery of self. It's a very different perceptive way to look. And you notice the body doesn't wear down from that thought thinking. It doesn't wear down thinking that way. It actually gets pretty lively about, okay, here we go. We're restoring, we're rejuvenating, we're reacclimating to now these energetic higher frequency environments that are, I don't think they're completely physical yet, but they're affecting the physical. And C and I've had so many odd, incredible, miraculous things happen. We're aware that we're living in a higher frequency field, uh, interspersed with everything else going on, part of the whole. So when I remember what she had said about her personal work with herself and others, about just keeping us anchored in the present moment of now, just and be that this, because it's just our mind doesn't do it right. Our mental perceptive mind thinks we're still in trauma recovery. But what if we're not? What if we actually are actively in the reclamation of self? I had a blood test done, a cholesterol blood test, All the doctors told me the odds of my getting my cholesterol down, which had surged suddenly after COVID and the death of Lily, uh, that I couldn't get it down. I did get it down. I got it down in less than 4 months, 2.5, 3.5 months. I got it down. And part of that had to do with my clarity that I couldn't afford to even think about trauma in my body. I had to only think about the reclamation of self. But honest to goodness, it never occurred to me there's a well, there did occur to me. I just didn't know how to get access to it. There's a reclamation of sense of self, like a personality. Honestly, like a personality. This is what makes it so hard to grasp perceptively because we have personality as our history, as our circumstances, all these stupid thought models in our head that keep positioning us back into a trauma-based reality that is not even how we're designed. It's just so crazy. So when I heard that, I I have been a lone voice in the wilderness, but notice that I had 3 sanctuaries. I have an incredible support structure. I have extraordinary clients. I get to live in levels of conversation that are to live for. And I've had an extraordinary life and still do. So that template, lone voice in the wilderness, doesn't fit here. But what I realized, it's pre-child, pre pre-child. So I had this thinking model. Let's use it again as imagination. I had this thinking model in my head show up. And let's imagine that when that transcendent self was getting ready to come in here and bilocate with a child, its itself as child, that it was informing the field as it accordion down towards matter. That remember, you may have to be a lone voice in the wilderness again here. You may have to do that. You need to have the strength, stamina, capacity for that. But the other one was in the last night, something happened. Something has been happening to me. I was talking to Heather this morning. She said she'd been noticing it since April. A more sense of personal self. Because I really you have no idea the level I've been mission based. And like I love my home. I adore my housemate. She's just a kick butt artist, a kick butt healer, and besides, she could never separate from herself, which is always my greatest litmus test. And and we have magic. I mean, two magical people have magic together. I mean, not with each other, but don't get the wrong drift. I'm not. We're not relationship. We're not that kind of relationship. We're best friends. So the point is that I woke up to go to write a Mailchimp out because I need to tell people about the class on Sunday. And I need to figure some things out financially. And so I was going to wake up and spend time with that. And instead, I woke up with this crazy thought called, I want to write, I just want to write my friend. Well, I don't do that. I, I'm like needs met oriented. I'm very self sufficient. I'm very self isolated. It's me and God. And all of a sudden, I realized that another thought frame, because these are the things I'd like to persist in this conversation. These are thought frames that came in as protection thought frames, because we, as a conscious being coming into a child in a low frequency system, we had to prep for it. We had to prep for it. And one of my preps was that I don't belong here, don't plan on having friends. They'll ostracize you because the humanity has become so aberrated. They've even become uh, uh, enemies of themselves. So that you can hear that if you don't hear it like a now personality, but you hear it like a wise personality framework coming in, realizing the challenges that before it, and realizing how the personality of the child had to construct itself to survive, including adapting to trauma, by the way. And but the odd thing is that what I realized is that both those thought streams don't come from this lifetime. I have been a lone voice in the wilderness, but I have not been alone. And I had the best friends ever growing up. They were part of what kept me sane, Lance and Susie and her kid brother, and then when I moved to our expensive house where there was hardly any friends, I had Sandra and Kay and the girl in the back street that my parents didn't want me to play with that I adored. So I suddenly realized that there are thought planes coming from not this history, not this history you're in and this personality. I think they were preparing us to come in. That they would, as we move down. So we have to lower our consciousness to get in here. I don't know if you know that. We have to because this has been in a low frequency, aberrated brokenness for some time. So something happened when I'm writing this letter, want to write a letter about uh, I have friends, and it isn't. I know it may sound weird. It may not even sound important, but I couldn't afford to have friends mission because I was mission oriented, except when I was a child. But I have had friends. I just haven't been where the 2, the higher and lower, come together enough, the both and, that the personal sense of self that is a meta point of your transcendent or it's a meta point of your transcendent self, or I call it the meta self, your transpersonal self, and your historic self, there's a blending happening. There is a blending of a trinity of self that is occurring. Funny, it's gonna be the fourth book called You as the Architecture of Creation. But for now, it's just an exciting moment in time because and I really hope we get to the other. I really hope it awakens completely in us, and that those of us that are beginning to get a sense of, and when you're in that, when you're in that because there's a sense of relaxation, there's a sense of maturity, there's a sense of got it, there's a sense of joy of the everyday that wasn't there before. There's a sense of because we couldn't afford to be attached to this place if it was going to cost us our completely forgetting. And a lot of people have been at the effect of the disease of forgetting here. That's like when Donna said, uh, remembrance is the awakening. It is the awakening because we just couldn't forget. We couldn't forget. So now, if you also think it like think of a recursion, a spiral, and we have been unpacking this as human beings for some time. Like Freud got it back to child, but then if you read Carl Jung, he took it beyond Freud identifying with parents and child to a sense of self, to a greater sense of self, the mystical, the greater mystery. Hold on. Personality. Hold on. I'm trying to sneeze. I don't know where that came from. My harmless coconut baby water. Part of my cure. Um, so that's what I wanted to unpack today. That we're having remembrance that I think is in the little scroll of the enteric nervous system. So just take care of your intestines. Don't do anything else. Just take care of your intestines. I had the queerest things happen. Like I'll tell you one, but please don't quote me or think I'm an authority in the matter. But one of the interesting things that happened before a huge configuration of events happened that let me know that in the vertical higher lower unity point of myself, others, in life, and my direct relationship with the greater whole of which I'm a part, that I could risk getting the vaccine and have it operate on behalf of life, not operate against life in me. um, was that I got on this product. It's called Invectrin, I think. I always pronounce it wrong. And, um, and but what's so humorous about it is they talk about COVID. Everybody talks about how it hits the lungs, but that's an after effect. It actually lives in the intestines, which I find fascinating, given that the ENS, enteric nervous system, is part of the intelligence of the original nature, the original design here. That still, and if you study Ayurveda, just look this up. Read what Ayurveda is based on, and you'll. It's supposedly the intestines and the solar plexus region are the seat of the soul. So it never occurred to me in a mystical way. I was taking Invectrin because I wasn't going to take the vaccine and I didn't want to get COVID. And I knew that if I could just keep my intestines on, which people have recovered from early COVID from taking this horse worm medicine, uh, that's was my intent. But what was so interesting about it is it had other effects on me, including a homeopathic remedy called conium, conium. Because COVID comes with a huge depression, which of course, because it's affecting your intestines. So biologically, I had this huge purge intestinally, and literally the next day came out of it with no more failure to thrive experience in my body, and the feeling that something had refoundationalized in my system. And then it was just about building back. It wasn't about constantly having to claw my way to the surface. And but the other thing that I didn't expect between these two homeopathic and traditional products, and this is where our thinking gets all filled up. Anything I can do to shift our thinking, because I've been having to shift mine, was it also seemed to clear out, thank you, everything in the way of that, my original nature, my original design, thought patterns that I can now discern came prior to my coming in here and were part of the protection preparation to support my new embodiment and being able to survive these years on behalf of this period of time that we're now moving into. Okay, I'm going to pause a minute. I want people to write their takeaways on the, I need to hear the takeaways, like, or anything that you're present to. I'm just going to wait a few minutes. Because I wanna make sure I've been as clear as possible. I want to be able to, yeah, and immunity develops in the intestines. And, I don't know, I just think if we stay on something that keeps our intestines cleaned out carefully, because the problem is that once you ask the intestines to clear out, they're more than happy to. So, you do have to have a life and not live in the John. But I do know it's the key to the kingdom, and especially right now, because I don't think this virus would have chosen to lodge in the intestines if it didn't know that was the way in the door to have a place to flourish. That's what I think. Okay, so people don't seem to be responding to me. I was on a call yesterday and I asked people to give feedback, what they heard, what their takeaways were. And I used to do shell shock. I don't, I mean, I used to ask people to share and they just stare at me. So I don't know if I'm back in that uh, catalytic impact point thing that used to happen. And uh, um, but we have to get at this perceptively. We have to practice thinking until our thinking is fulfilled in a non-trauma based manner. We really need to do this. So if you who could write a takeaway, what you've, I'm going to persist a little bit more today, although it's fine if our minds see, it's not bad news we can't think. It's not bad news that we don't even know what I said. It's not bad news that we can't recall anything. It's not bad news. It just means that I got past the barrier, that the conversation got past the configuration of perception that has us locked in place. Very good. Very good. Very good, Andrea. And the thing is, like when in what Andrea said, she's in a place where viruses don't exist, then that's your territory. That's you as a field being, being a field, being your consciousness on behalf of all life. It doesn't mean anything about other people, you guys. It doesn't mean anything about then everybody should do that. We, each one of us, that's why I am so trying to make every piece of work I do personalized to the person now, where I used to do almost all group work publicly, is because our unique and essential design is what is needed now. If Andrea has her psyche and self located in her territory, then her territory is hers to build. Heather's her territory to build. Lisa, Gail, in our territory, in our direct, each of our own direct link with creation, because everybody has a different scroll. Everybody has a different parchment. But the point is, if we can come on calls like this, we're going to do another group, another collective call that'll be Facebook Live. I'm sorry, uh, more interactive. If we can just come speaking from our territory, each of our individual consciousnesses that came in here and had to aberrate just enough to get into here, or we were from here originally and our faithfulness and our love of this planet brought us back. If each of us stays in that vertical alignment of self and its direct awakening of its own self and its own wisdom, then we will do something that we read about in Sand Talk by Yunka Porta. There's a great indigenous man. We'll be in what's called distributed cognition. That is, each of us feeds the field, as each of us waters the garden, the different plants will grow, the different consciousnesses that we're a part will grow. One of the things I write about in You as the Mind of Creation is the consciousness, the social culture of mind we were born into tries to redact everything down into one thing. It's killing us. Look around. I mean, even where I am now, in my own home, in my own backyard, we have a variety of trees, a variety of plants. You know, the a catawba tree is not trying to tell the olive tree that it needs to be a catawba. So we've got to get some wiggle room into not positioning also into right or wrong or good or bad, because we're past all that. We're literally sharing consciousness. We're fertilizing remembrance. We're not trying to find the right answer to things. It's really, really important. Really. I'm just reading Lisa. And since it was part of preparation that being here I the wrong. No, it doesn't. Yes. Yes. That's why I said today my whole world's about getting access to things. And so what you wrote, I would call perception, because being a seer, I can perceive. We all do. We're all seers. And but what Lisa's talking about. It's very, very important, because we have to remember we're etheric first. We're energy first, matter section second. We're spirit first, flesh second. We're densified principles of much larger systems of creation. And so sometimes we can be aware of something, but we can't get access to what we're aware of. That's the edge. That's the rough edge we're on. I have a term called guardian at the gate. It's a matrix. It's actually a persona matrix that's in many human beings that have come here. And it's basically guarding the territory, and not against, but guarding the precious consciousnesses that are re-arising, the remembrance that are arising, just like you would put a fence around the chicken coop so the fox couldn't get in. But there's nothing wrong with the fox. He just shouldn't eat the chickens. They need to have their place. And a lot of this new consciousness needs a place. It just needs a place. It needs a place to grow and fertilize and nourish. And then it gives us itself. Consciousness is independent of our personality. Otherwise, it would have been killed off in us a long time ago. Consciousness, however, can be formed into personality, which is what Carl Jung was so adamant about, that there needed to be a time that human beings consciously formed a healthy ego. And we need to consciously form a facade, a place. A personality is a place, it's a location. You know, when people say, "Who are you?" You identify yourself, you locate yourself in some way. And, uh, and it's been totally part of the mesmerization. Like we haven't seen the value of having a personal sense of self and having our ability to perceive it because it gives us access to magic, gives us access to capabilities and strengths that we had no idea we had because the aberrated personality that the child fought that the child fought our child self. Can you imagine what it'd be like to be a fully developed consciousness and come into an earth child self that's not allowed to be brilliant the day they're born? They are brilliant the day they're born, by the way. Indigenous people raise children like they're wiser than they are. But the culture most of us got born into didn't do that. We had to say goo goo and gaga and be here. I even remember something hearing someone say, "Oh, isn't she cute?" And I remember my brain twisted. I didn't ever thought, but it was like, how weird. And so we've got to kind of reframe this beginning we're in because our systems are restoring. We are restoring as self. In other words, heaven on earth, paradise embodied. We are. We are. And even if just a few of us, you know, we have a lot of invasive species because they are called invasive species because they're the ones that survive and they're beautiful. We have this beautiful thorny thing that we're going to let grow in front of our wall. So if anybody decides to come over, they probably won't have a good time. We have cactus over on that side, so they won't have a good time if they come over our wall and uninvited. But the point is that everything has a place, and we need to give a place for see, as the cellular empath. I've always read the original nature, the original design, what I used to call the core self of a human being, and I knew that in the consults that I was activating that core design. So I never really cared if I made sense, although I seemed to make sense, which is even more fascinating. And because I knew I had to get that core origin ex- awake again in the person. And even if they never came back or never believed a word I'd said, I'd at least triggered that original cellular memory, not the historic memory. So the original cellular memory could have more power than uh, uh, than the historic aberration. So it, yes, Linda, I bet you did. It's good to see you. Hi, honey. And so it's just really crazy. It's just really crazy what's happening in such a good way and hard. Because remember, we define ourselves by our thinking. We think the thoughts we think are real. We probably should get a little discernment about that, don't you? Or see where they come from. Like that is, I'm telling you, I'm just kicked butt about, wow, what if I'm not a lone voice in the wilderness? What if we are now? What if we're coming out of the wilderness? What if we're rising? Now, do I register that? And does that seem can my present personality framework and how it's designed incorporate that yet? Nope, promise. But I can keep it fascinating. I can keep it intriguing. Two very powerful magical terms. Fascination and intrigue are very powerful magics. And then the other one about I don't belong here. Well, I know I don't belong here. I know I'm not from here. So why do I keep saying that? That seems kind of stupid. I don't belong here. That doesn't mean but here, I mean it's like your whole logic system things changes because then I'm like, yeah, but here they have friends. So why don't I do here and uh acknowledge that here you can have friends and just get with the program. Enjoy the beauty of what human beings can are designed to be here. I mean, can you hear the shift of mind? And the last thing I want to say Thank you, by the way. This has been fabulous, and I'll probably stay on my computer because it's great to interact with the comments and watch them and us play off each other. That is orgasmic. But the other thing is that something happened. There's a woman in our Field of Tetramat thread, WhatsApp thread, who's brilliant, wise. Well, everybody is, but I mean, in her own manner, she carries her own sense of self. She's strong in it. She has huge credibility with her own design. That's what I'm trying to say. Not brilliant according to human terms, but she has a huge credibility in her authentic nature of self. And she and I butted heads about something recently, and but because of it, we butted heads like for 2 seconds on a WhatsApp thread. Um, but it was enough to jar me into realizing we have to be careful what we think because we have to be careful of polarizing ourselves in case something is no longer so. I want to say that again. We have to be careful about our thinking because our thinking is probably based on the past. And we don't know if in the future that will necessarily be so. That's all. Because I have been, I have gone through, there's this great song in Porgy Bess. It's called It Ain't Necessarily So. I think I'm going to start playing it again in the house. But we are in a shift of state. You know, the ground in Grass Valley, Nevada City, they felt 3 earthquakes. One close, it was 6.2. Everything's changing. Our biology is changing. It's transcending itself. It's forcing us into relaxation. It is reducing its stress markers, its stress stamina, so that because the self within us is not stress based, it's not trauma based, it's joy based, it's freedom based, it's play based. Children can play all day and not come in and eat a full dinner and collapse, and eat a full dinner and collapse. So the return to self is now engaged at a visceral person per what's the word, a public in a public way. I'm not saying the full public. The public is still pretty enrolled in all sorts of interesting polarities. Uh, but privately, that's why I liked what Andrea said about where she exists in her territory. They don't exist. Works for me. They do exist for me, but it's the construct of my design. It's always the construct of our design. That's why knowing self is so important because the construct of your design takes care of that part of the multi-dimensional, multi-frequency, multi-vibrational, multi-layered universe that we all belong in. I'm a guardian. I'm a guardian at the gate. I get to see both sides of the fence. Um, I don't live in a single oneness totality, and a lot of people do. And I think you all should really mature yourself. That's not me. I live in a duality mentality on purpose because this is a duality system so far. And as long as we have a physical and non-physical environment, the balance, harmony, symmetry, proportion, grace, and beauty for the development of this earth matters to me. And it isn't right or wrong, it's joy and love. And each of us has our own template. And if we can really, like, I really know Andrea's template, that's really clear to me that she has a sustainability point somewhere that is just not my interest. But it doesn't mean it's not interesting. It's fascinating. But my interest is always progressive where I'm standing. Your interest is always progressive where you're standing. Because that's what we are. We're meant to express and play and increase the vitality of things and be alive and well. So I decided to end this call with letting you know something. And we all get in a big twisted knickers about money. But I want to put it in the field today. And and we get so screwed up about people trying to enroll people in things or pay money for things. And a lovely person, her name's Kaya, said, most people know you're not like that. So why don't you just go for it? Why don't you just go for being presencing something. Because notice I could presence the body, I could present personality, I could presence culture, but we there's this weird stuff around money. So I want to explain something to you because this is a sacred space for rest and courage for all of us. Whatever you post, whatever you write, we hold it sacrosanct and we take care of each other because that's why it's a private group. And we're all about forwarding each other's as who we are and giving space for each other to grow and to have the courage and safety to do that. So I understand leverage points and I understand tipping points. I know I'm going over a bit. So if y'all need to leave, I'm way over actually. I just realized, but here we go. Uh, so I start to feel something like a volcano. It 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 really is hard on me. I'm very primordial. Like it's the mother wherever I am, I'm probably a planetary sister of Gaia, if metaphorically speaking. So I feel things in me like you would feel thunder or volcano or rain or hurricane. Do you understand? It's a great intensity. And and that's why this conversation is going longer. It's why I'm going to do my MailChimp on the course on the iMagi on Sunday, I think it is. I can't remember. And so I think it's Sunday, this Sunday or next Sunday. But the point is, I'm driven by conversation. I'm driven by the necessity for something to up level, something to reset, something to come into existence. And my fascination is shortening the distance between 2 points. So I was talking to Kaya the other day, and I said, I want, I want to invite people up, small group of people because I can't do a large group here, 3 to 5 people probably, and they'll know who they are. It's not a matter of, oh God, I hate this conversation, but I'm gonna struggle through it. They'll just know who they are. And foundationally, for personal work, I charge $500 a day. I just do. And I always have. It's never changed, but I haven't literally in a public setting, I haven't done thank you, Heather. It's iGuardian at the gate this Sunday. It's on my website, drmott.com. Ugh. But anyway, so I'm just letting every venue I have know about it. I'll also be sending it out on MailChimp. But $500 a day for 3 days is $1,500. So I want you to know that. And I want to do it. I think it's the second weekend in August, I think. And I want to tell you what it is. And I'm very excited about it. Let me get to August. It's the come in on the night of the 11th. No, yeah, come in on the night of the 11th. It's the 12th, 13th, and 14th. Spend the night, have a day off on Sunday in this beautiful place I live in, and then fly out Sunday night or Monday. But it's personal work. So each person, I will be personally working with you because if I can restore a few, if I, not I, if we can work together to restore this original template of the original design in the personality, anchored in the personality of only a few of us. And some of us can't afford this, and I'm aware of that. And I know that. But you know what? Some of us can. And if we all line up for the people that come, makes me want to cry. If we all line up for those people that are going to come on all of our behalf, we can pull something through. We can get through what's called the eye of the needle. We can increase the potentiality of the original nature, the original design of the personalities that we were designed to be and the territories those personalities carry and the ability for us to hear each other and forward each other through our listening. We will shorten the distance between the the aberrations sometimes take a very long time to if we leave it only to evolution and we leave it only to to consciousness. Our power as human beings is our increased participation shortens the distance between points. It shortens the distance between points. And that is a key element of what needs to happen now. Simply, because we just are tired of trauma and we're tired of being in a reality that promotes suffering and separation. Thank you. This has been fabulous for me today. Uh, I really hope you all come back and embellish on the conversation that you all have been part of. I want to thank you personally from Lily and I, my dog, because her death was a real showstopper for me. I knew it was coming, but because she gave me reason to be here, and she wouldn't have left if if life wasn't still worth living. And I don't say that lightly. And that there would be things coming that she actually was in the way of, and she knew it. And now I have Esme, my dragon, our dragon. She'll be here. By the time you get here, we'll have private spaces. Those of you that are coming, we'll have private spaces for you to do your own work. I'll meet with you individually. You'll set up your own program. I'm so excited. I can hardly stand it because the people that know that they can come and will come, they also know they're doing it on behalf of the whole. Take precious care, everyone. I noticed I don't know how to end the video.